Okay, in this video I'm going to answer a question that I generally only answer. I've been asked several times this question, but I generally only answer it in emails. Not for any particular reason other than I just did not get a chance to answer the question here. Now generally this question comes from people who live in the Philippines, Malaysia, areas where people are generally shorter. And that is, how do you get respect, and how do you utilize a defensive way of defensive system, or basically how do you carry yourself when you're short? How do you carry yourself when you're short? Now, most people on social media, they simply don't talk about these things. They don't. You have combative teachers, self-defense teachers, 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds, and you have people 5'9", 5'10", commenting like, yeah, he's really dangerous. Well, you can't use what he's using. You can't use what he's using. You look at all these different combative teachers, self-defense teachers, right? Most of this stuff doesn't work, period. Anytime you were looking at someone, I'm going to say this, anytime, and a lot of us black folks, we do it. Anytime you were looking at somebody and they are doing joint locks and all kinds of joint locks and throwing people by their thumbs and throwing people by their wrists, I'm telling you right now, look at any episode of Cops or any kind of episode where you have police officers arresting people, really arresting them. Look at any one of those shows, any one of those documentaries, and you see the joint locks and wrist locks and all this other stuff. One-on-one doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. Black people love this kind of stuff. You can look at the channels and you see these people flipping people by the thumb, flipping people by the wrist, and they just eat it up, especially on the East Coast. And it's one particular style that they just adore. And I will not name this particular style. If you're from the East Coast, you know what style I'm talking about. But I respect the master, the deceased master, the founder of the style. I respect him. But all in all, that particular style just does not work. Okay? I don't care whether you're talking about Aikido, which is not the style I'm talking about. Any kind of martial art where you see people and they are doing all kinds of joint locks and all kinds of thumb locks and this, chicken wing and all this other stuff. I am telling you now, it is garbage. It does not work. And if you don't believe me, you can look at any episode of Cops, any documentary where you're looking at police officers and trying to subdue somebody, and you see it doesn't work. But not only don't you have martial arts that work, but you have people who basically can do anything they want to do. When you were 6'3", 250 pounds, you really don't have to be good at much anything, because most of the time people really are not going to try you. All right. So I am addressing people who are like below 5'10". Over 5'10", if you're 5'10", 195 pounds, you're all right. You're okay. All right. Even though the average height may be a little bit taller than 5'10" today, and you got a lot of people running around at 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 5'9", 5'8", 5'7", like I am, 5'6", 5'5". This is for you. It's not to say other people can't listen. You're gonna learn something no matter what I say. Everyone is going to learn something from it. Be able to take something away from anything I say, anything that I post. But the reality is, this is really a concern of people who are like 5'9", 5'7", 5'6", 5'5". Okay, now listen up, and this is going to help you if you're relatively short and you want to earn the respect of your peers or earn the respect of men that you just see in the street or people you work with. This is how I did it. This is good advice. I'm not self-taught, but I was taught by real men. Back in the 60s and 70s, my brother included, my uncles included, my karate teachers included, and here is some real information for you. Number one, you need to understand this. There were two things. If you were relatively short, all right, well, before I jump into that, let me say this. There are people who will tell you, and they will probably come into this forum and say, well, you know what, height doesn't matter. Anyone who tells you that, they're lying. There will be people who will tell you weight doesn't matter. Anyone who tells you that, they're lying. Now, are there some YouTube videos where you will see someone short knock out someone who's taller? Yes. Are there YouTube videos where you will see someone who is maybe 160 pounds knock out somebody who's 200 pounds or more? Yes. But those videos go viral. And why do those videos go viral? They go viral because it's rare. When someone's arms are as long as your legs, the dynamic of that altercation changes. Okay? Let me say it again. When someone's arms are as long as your legs, the dynamic of that particular confrontation changes. If someone can bench press 350 pounds and you weigh 150 pounds, the dynamics of that altercation changes. So if anyone tells you that weight and height doesn't matter, they are lying. They're lying to you, and or they have never been in a real situation where they have to be proven right or wrong by their theory. Okay, so let's understand that. Now, when you are relatively short, when you're shorter than the average person, it doesn't come down in the beginning. It does not start. Well, I'm not beginning. It does not start with punches and kicks. It does not start with punches and kicks. It starts with how you handle yourself. That's where it starts. It starts with how you handle yourself. There are two things that you don't want any man. I don't care how tall you are. You can be 6'2", 6'3". I don't care how tall you are or how short you are. There are several things that you do not want to happen if you want respect. If you want to be relatively and live a relatively peaceful life amongst men who otherwise would be violent, I'm not talking about a group of monks. Men who have the potential or have a personality where if they can get a bead, if they can get a jump on you, they will get violent. If you want to live relatively peaceful around those people, there are two things, at least two things, but the two things I'm going to mention are the main two things that you want to avoid. Predictability and familiarity. Predictability and familiarity. You do not want any man, no matter how tall you are, no matter how heavy you are. Again, if you're 6'2", 6'3", this goes for you. If you are less than 5'10", it goes double for you. You do not want a man to be able to predict your behavior or to be familiar with your behavior. So you might ask, well, Safe, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Do you laugh too much? How much do you laugh? Now, many of you may think that's not a big deal. You may think it's not a big deal. I will tell you, I've never really laughed that much. But most of you know that I had a brief stint of incarceration. And it was there that I learned. It was there that I learned from a brother who was doing life in 10 years to be exact, who actually told me when I laughed at a joke that was relatively funny. He told me, he said, don't let me see you do that again. Do not let me see you do that again. And the reason why he said that, he was so adamant about it, was because I had helped him with his case, and we just happened to get along. We were both mature guys. We'd rather watch the news than rap videos, that kind of thing. And he basically told me, he said, listen, don't let me see you do that again. And I've never laughed that much ever in my life, period. I've never been a big laugher. Most people know that I rarely, Safe Carmen rarely shows his molar teeth. The most I would do usually would just be grin. But do you laugh a lot? Well, when you laugh a lot, not only you laughing, but the things that you laugh at, you become predictable. You become predictable, and people become familiar with you. And then pretty soon there are jokes, and pretty soon there are things said. And before you know it, they're testing the waters. And what they used to joke about, the jokes that they used to tell, it becomes more insults than anything else. Now you have to look and you have to deal with those insults. So we will look and we will say, okay, that's a small thing. No, it's not. It's not. Another reason why you do not want men to become familiar with you, right, is because of this. Because of this. When people don't know what you are capable of doing or what you were willing to do, you find that they're not willing to test you. You find that they're not willing to test you. People do not test you in the street or in potentially violent situations or in clubs or in nightclubs. People do not test you generally when they think there's a 50-50 chance that you will beat them up if they start something with you. But generally that's not what people do. When someone starts something with you, when a man agitates, when a man pushes you for some kind of violent confrontation, when he does that, when he tests the waters, he's not 100% sure that he can overcome you in a violent situation. He's not 100% sure, but he's sure enough to take that chance. And it's more than 50%. According to his odds, it's more than 50%. And one reason why he believes he has a good chance, maybe you don't think you said anything. Maybe you don't think you behaved in a certain way. I will tell you, you have. I will tell you, you have. Even though you may not think you have given something away. You have given some sign away. And maybe it's saying excuse me when you didn't bump into someone. It might be saying excuse me when someone bumped into you. When somebody saw that you said excuse me to a man who should have said excuse me to you. Or maybe someone said something to your girlfriend, and instead of saying something to the man, you said something to your girlfriend. Whatever the case might be, if someone is deliberately trying to start a physical confrontation with you, they have seen something. There is something that you gave away. And something that you gave away has nothing to do with it, has nothing to do with punches, has nothing to do with kicks. So this is extremely important, more than being 6'2", more than if you're 6'3", your conduct, your behavior, and the avoidance of people becoming familiar with you, or people people being able to predict your behavior. These things are extremely important. Now, there is a myth. There are some people who say, well, you know what, laughing, well, you never let a man see you cry either. That's not necessarily true. That is not necessarily true, and most people will not tell you that, but I'm telling you that. What you want to avoid is being too amused too easily. Laughing too much. Laughing too much is worse, and is more dangerous, and is more of a no-no than crying if you're despondent in front of another man. And I'll tell you why. Because every single man knows, over a certain age, that people have gotten hurt by people who just before they hurt a person was crying. I'm going to say that again, but maybe in a different way. Every man knows that people who have cried, or people who have been so upset about something that they shed tears, every man knows that they are capable, out of frustration, killing someone seconds after they were crying. So the relationship to maybe some women and a man who cries, it may be skewed. But a man who sees another man shed tears, and I'm not saying bawling and throwing himself all over the floor. I'm saying shedding tears. A man who sees another man shed tears does not assume that he is weak. That is a misperception, and that is a lie that you've been told. I have been around men who were predators. I'm telling you, I have been around men who, if you show any sign of weakness, if there is any doubt in their mind that you will stab them, any doubt in their mind that you will choke them to death in their sleep. I have been around men who were predators, and they could see a man shed tears and would not assume that he was weak. No. Because immediately after any individual, even a woman, immediately after an individual sheds tears, they are capable of killing someone out of frustration, out of the same frustration that led to the shedding of tears. Next, it needs to be assumed, even if you do not show it, it needs to be assumed that you will hurt someone. It needs to be assumed that you will hurt someone. And it does not mean you were running around acting like a tough guy. It does not mean that you tell people you've had fictitious fights that fights that you've never had. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you disagree with every man that says something. It doesn't mean that either, to try to show that you won't be dominated in the conversation. It doesn't mean that either. What it means is that you have to carry yourself in such a way that the person, again, cannot predict your behavior. So there has to be some kind of assumption. There has to be the assumption. There has to be enough doubt in a person's mind for them to behave themselves in your presence. Now, before I close up this video, I want to say this. Okay? Before I tell you some of the practical things, all right? For me personally, there is something that people know about me. And it's something that you may find to be strange, and everybody can do it. There are some people from the Philippines, they contact me from Malaysia, 150 pounds, 160 pounds. I do recommend finding a way to get up to maybe 175 pounds. If you are 5'6", 5'7", 5'8", 5'5", you should try to get up to about 175 pounds. I see really no reason why you can't if you do it well and you do it right and you put on the weight in the right way. I see no reason why you can't have functional weight. I'm 5'7", I can carry close to 200 pounds of functional weight. What does that mean? What that means is I can train or be in a physical confrontation, not considering the adrenaline dump that you will have if your head is not right, because you can be in very good cardiovascular shape and have an adrenaline dump because you're so afraid in the situation. Now, notwithstanding that, I can carry a 5'7", close to 200 functional pounds. Okay, and this means I don't get tired walking. It's not weight that I just can't function with. I can function with almost 200 pounds at 5'7", and one reason is because I'm bottom heavy, which essentially comes from wrestling. I carry a lot of weight in my legs. Now, if you were 5'6", 5'7", 5'5", you should try to get up to about 170, 175 pounds and find some weights, right? And I'm just telling you the easy way. You do not have to do so many difficult things, so many advanced aerobics and advanced working out and this kind of this and this kind of that. 175 pounds, well developed, you'll end up looking like you're 200 pounds. Okay, 175 pounds, well developed, all right, in a proper way, muscle, a lot of muscle mass, low body fat, you will look about 200 pounds. Okay, period. So there is a practical opponent or practical element to this. Now, I said before I finish this video, I wanted to say something. Most people know me in my mindset. If you are a shorter person, you need to be able to be comfortable in situations where there might be a violent altercation. Now, sure, you want to remove yourself from there, and you don't want to be there if you don't have to be there. But you need to be practical. You need to be practical. Let me give you an example. You can be practical, and I recommend you take on this mindset. There are many people who are 5'6", 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", who change their behavior when they are around someone who is 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds. They change their behavior. You can look at them. They're very convenient in how they speak. They tailor their argument, or their argument to fit the audience. Okay, which basically means that these are men that, because they're shorter, they behave a different way around bigger people than they behave around people their size or smaller or shorter. I don't. And it's known amongst my friends and family. And this is why. This is how I think. If someone, listen up, if someone is 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds in my presence, okay, they are in more danger than someone who is 5'5". If someone is 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds in my presence, and we have a disagreement, they are in more danger than someone who is 5'5", 150 pounds. And I'll tell you why. Because I know if a violent confrontation breaks out with someone who is much bigger than me, I have no choice but to hurt them severely in order to stop the threat. I'm going to say that again. The reason why bigger people who are much bigger than me, are in more danger in my presence if there is a disagreement, or if there is not a disagreement, but if there is a violent situation. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am and, be relatively happy and relatively safe, upstanding citizen if it was just about a disagreement. But they are in more danger if I think there's going to be a physical altercation and I can't remove myself from that position or from that situation. Bigger people are in more danger. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again so it sinks in. Because of this entire video, I think it's one of the most important things. I think it is the most important thing for you to take away from it. If a person is much bigger, they are in more danger. Because I know I can't cut corners. I know it will come down to me or them in a big way. I know it. So if a man is 5'5", 5'6", and he's 150 pounds, there are things that I might let slide. I will not go overboard if I think there's going to be a violent confrontation. I may not go to the extent that I will go to the limits that I will go if someone is much bigger than me. But if someone is 6'3", 240 pounds, and I know there's going to be a violent confrontation, there is going to be a great deal of blood, and I am going to do my best to make sure none of it is mine. And the reason is because that person's size, with the way I think, it works against him. With that person's size, with the way I think, the way I approach violence, the way I approach my circumstances, the way I deal with violent situations, it works against him and not for him. Most people do not think like that. But people who understand violence, they do think like that. And this is something that some people know. And when they know you're like that, you live relatively peaceful. Predictability or familiarity. Those are two things you want to avoid. Every man wants to avoid them. If you are under 5'10", you want to avoid them doubly as much. See you next week.